Hello. I am Pastor Susie Todd, and I extend my welcome to those of you here in person and online. I'm glad that you took the time to join us on this holy day of Detroit Lions football. There is a big game this evening. The Detroit Lions versus the San Francisco 49ers. It's for the NFC Championship and a place in Super Bowl 58. It has been a great season for the Lions and for the city of Detroit. The excitement is palpable, and it has been a long time coming. I must confess, I am the ultimate in a fair weather fan. I have probably watched more games this season than the previous 5 combined. I own exactly 0 articles of clothing in Honolulu blue, and I can only name about 5 players. Goff and St. Brown and Hutchinson, who's a local boy here, and Ragnow. And I can only name about 4 players. But maybe you're a better person than I am. Perhaps you have been a Lions fan for a really long time. Perhaps you actually loved them when they broke the record in 2008, going 0 for 16 for the most losses ever in a single season. Or maybe you loved them in 2009 when the very best they could do against the Ravens was 3 lousy points to the 48. Maybe there have been days or even years when you wondered why you stay loyal. I gotta ask, do you regret that Joey Harrington jersey? Don't worry. We have all loved things that we later regretted. Those 1970s bell bottoms with the 4-button fly, mutton chops, the Ford Pinto, or those Aquanet 1980s bangs that made me 4 inches taller. We all have regrets. The funny thing about regrets is it always starts out seeming like a good idea, but then it seems to unravel. This even happens in the Bible. We meet a Shunammite woman in 2 Kings 4 whose life starts out pretty good. But then, well, we'll see. Hear this from verses 8 through 13. One day, Elisha went to Shunem. A rich woman lived there. She urged him to eat something. So whenever he passed by, he would stop in to eat some food. She said to her husband, "Look, I know that he is a holy man of God and he passes by regularly. Let's make a small room on the roof. We'll set up a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp for him there. Then when he comes to us, he can stay there." So one day Elisha came there, headed to the room on the roof, and lay down. He said to his servant Gehazi, "Call this Shunammite woman." Gehazi called her, and she stood before him. Elisha then said to Gehazi, "Say to her, 'Look, you've gone to all this trouble for us. What can I do for you? Is there anything I can say on your behalf to the king or to the commander of the army?" And she said, "I'm content to live at home with my own people." So this is a family of great means. She is a rich woman. She doesn't just have enough to meet her family's wants and needs. She also has enough to provide for Elisha. And not just food, the family is wealthy enough to put an addition on their home for this itinerant holy man. Now that's some serious cash. What more could she possibly want? As she says, she is content. Her life is good exactly as it is. But she has invited Elisha into her life, and things will not stay the same. The story continues with verses 14 through 17. Elisha asked, "So what can be done for her?" Gehazi said, "Well, she doesn't have a son, and her husband is old." Elisha said, "Call her." So Gehazi called her, and she stood at the door. Elisha said, "About this time next year, you will be holding a son in your arms." But she said, "No, man of God, don't lie to your servant." But the woman conceived and gave birth to a son at about the same time the next year. This was what Elisha had promised her. First, I want you to note the woman never says she wants a child. The men just assume it. Now, we don't have time to fully go into that mess, but it certainly has an ick factor for those of us within our culture and time where there are perfectly valid reasons to not have children. Plenty of childless families are more than content with their decision. But this story takes place several thousand years ago, and you can't really understand a biblical story without understanding the culture. So know that it was a cultural norm that not having children was problematic. There was no Social Security 401ks or IRAs, and probably no good senior care facilities. So having children was highly beneficial as you aged. Widows had almost no rights, and without children were at the mercy of society. And Gehazi said, her husband is old. So maybe that was an imminent risk. After all, death does come for all of us, even the rich. You see, one of the pitfalls of wealth is that it can deceive us into feeling bulletproof or at least self-sufficient, independent of our neighbors and even God. After all, we can buy whatever we need and pay whomever we need to in order to get things done. We can have the best food, the safest car, the warmest coat. If we have the best of everything, what could God possibly offer us? And maybe that's the point here. No matter how much money we have, how fortunate we are in any and all ways, there's always going to be something, some yearning, some unfulfilled desire. There's always going to be something that looks like it could make life just a little sweeter. So this story continues in 2 Kings 4:18 through 28. The child grew up. One day he ran to his father, who was with the harvest workers. He said to his father, "Oh, my head, my head." The father said to a young man, "Carry him to his mother." So he picked up the boy and brought him to his mother. The boy sat on her lap until noon, then he died. She went up and laid him down on the bed for the man of God. Then she went out and closed the door. She called her husband and said, "Send me one of the young men and one of the donkeys so that I can hurry to the man of God and come back." Her husband said, "Why are you going to him today? It's not a new moon or Sabbath." She said, "Don't worry about it." She saddled the donkey, then said to her young servant, "Drive the donkey hard. Don't let me slow down unless I tell you." So she went off and came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. As soon as the man of God saw her from a distance, he said to Gehazi, his servant, "Look, it's the Shunammite woman. Run out to meet her and ask her, 'Are things okay with you, your husband, and your child?'" She said, "Things are okay." When she got to the man of God at the mountain, she grabbed his feet. Gehazi came up to push her away, but the man of God said, "Leave her alone. She is distraught. But the Lord has hidden the reason from me and hasn't told me why." She said, "Did I ask you for a son, sir? Didn't I say, 'Don't raise my hopes'? Don't worry about it. Things are okay." Who could say that in the wake of their son's death? This rich Shunammite woman remains remarkably calm. Maybe it's her status in society that expects it of her. Maybe that level of decorum was non-negotiable in her world. I don't know, but it's clear that she is holding it together until she sees Elisha. She grabs his feet. This is not a posture of a rich woman. This is not a posture that indicates, "Don't worry about it, things are okay." This is an act of desperation and humility. You know, those ancient feet weren't showered or covered with socks or closed-toed shoes. You remember the Jesus foot washing story. And Elisha says it. She's distraught. Grief can do that to us. It's a terrible equalizer. It cuts us all down to desperation. And there's nothing we can do to prevent it. Well, almost nothing. And then she says, "Did I ask you for a son?" Didn't I say, don't raise my hopes? Perhaps she regretted allowing Elisha into her home. Perhaps she regretted her pregnancy, but mostly I suspect she regretted that she allowed herself to love. You see, grief is a product of love. If you don't want to risk grief, you can't have love. Do you remember how content she was before? Remember when Elisha asked her what he could do for her? She said nothing. She was content. Life was good. Why, oh why, had he made her love a child? Have you ever thought, I wish I could go back. I wish I could go back and undo or redo something? I have. I have played and replayed conversations in which I regretted my choice of words. I have regretted while driving, while trying to pick up something from the floor of my car and sideswiping a mailbox. I have regretted time wasted laying on the couch while my to-do list did not get checked off. I've regretted spending too much on shoes. Do you have regrets? Regrets can impact relationships. Regrets can fester and convince us that we are bad. Regrets can give us a stomach ache and they can keep us up at night. So how do we get past regrets? You don't feed the regret, you feel the regret. Feel the regret without avoiding or wallowing in it. Own it, but don't let it own you. Whatever we did, it is a part of who we are, but it is not defining. It's a single data point in a very full life. And guess what? God is most readily found in those places of our weakness, of our humility, of our dependence. Grief humbled the Shunammite woman. She fell onto the feet of Elisha. So feel your regrets and allow yourself to fall onto God's mercy. If you caused harm, make amends. It's hard to admit when we've done something wrong. It's hard to admit we've made a mistake. And that's not entirely the worst, though. It's hard to admit to the person that we hurt that what we did caused them harm. And it's even harder to go back after some time and reopen that wound. Nobody wants to reopen a wound, but the wounds cannot properly heal. The relationship cannot healthily go forward if we aren't willing to make amends. We can't undo it, but we can make amends. It's hard. But good people do hard things with the help of God. Number 3, forgive yourself. If we live life fully, we're going to make mistakes. Everyone does. We're not supposed to be perfect, otherwise we wouldn't need God's grace. And for many of us, we more readily forgive others than we do ourselves. Why is that? We're supposed to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, but that means we're supposed to love ourselves. So be as generous with yourself in forgiveness as you are with anybody else. 4, reframe the experience with God. Everything we do, everyone we meet is an opportunity to learn and grow. I like to believe when I really mess up that I've really just kind of fertilized the ground for God to make something fantastic out of my mess. You see, God is with us in our errors. God is with us in our regrets, in our justifications, and in our humbling. God stays with us as we become someone new from the ashes. God gives us eyes to see it all as an opportunity to become better and to do better. Number 5, Use your regret to clarify your values. When the Shunammite woman says to Elijah, "Did I ask you for a son, sir? Didn't I say, don't raise my hopes?" She acknowledges that her pain is a result of having loved. She wrestles with regret for having ever loved her son. She wonders whether she values the joy of love during those years of her son's life more than she values that old contentment that has now been buried in grief. In the final analysis, joy outweighs pain. Love outweighs loss. She wants her son back, even though it means putting her heart back out in the world. So feel the regret. Make amends. Forgive yourself. Reframe the experience and clarify your values. For a very practical life example, the lions might break our hearts tonight. But we're not going to regret the love we've had for them this year. It's been a great ride, and the joy outweighs the heartbreak. We can't play it safe forever, like Dan Campbell's 2-point conversions. We've got to take some risks, because living half-heartedly is not what we were created for. So hang on to hope, even in the notorious third and fourth quarters of life. Because as we've seen more than once this football season, not even the third quarter Lions are beyond hope. This is the final week of our series, Hope in Hard Times. We've talked about some really difficult things. We've met the prophets Elijah and Elisha at some difficult crossroads. God was always there. God is always here. May you have eyes open to witnessing that presence and a heart vulnerable enough to experience hope again and again, even in the most difficult seasons. By the way, the Shunammite woman's story doesn't stop there. A miracle happens in 2 Kings 4:29 through 37, but you get to read that by yourself. Amen.